Parshas Bo. Wanted to discuss a very fundamental Sefer HaChinuch. It's fundamental in the concept of Tikkun HaMiddos. So we have in the Parsha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commands Klal Yisrael the mitzvah of the Karban Pesach, which will be differentiating them from the Mitzrayim during Makas Bechoros, among many other things. And the Sefer HaChinuch just goes through some of the mitzvos in this week's parsha, and one of the reasons that we understand behind them. We have a mitzvah here of shechting a Karban Pesach, and a separate mitzvah to eat a Karban Pesach. That is a mitzvah that al tochu ubashel b'mushal b'mayim kim tzliyesh. It has to be roasted, not cooked or boiled. And the idea that he explains many of these mitzvos is a zecher of the nes of Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's supposed to tap us into that tremendous mitzvah, that nes that Hashem made for us of taking us out of Mitzrayim, and tap us into that feeling of royalty. It says the way of royalty is to eat roasted meat. Other people, they need the roasted meat. It sounds like you could pound a lot of it. And he says it's better tasting in a certain way, as opposed to, I guess, cooking it in a way where it'll be much more filling with much less meat. He goes on, there's mitzvahs about destroying chometz, of eating matzah, mitzvah of not feeding it to the wrong people. Mitzvah Tezayin is the mitzvah not to break the bones of the Karban Pesach. Again, in the way of royalty, that it's not the way of Bnei Malachim to be breaking the bones to get every last scrap. So to be like the poor, hungry ones, it's not the way we act. On that night, we remember we're the Mamleches Kohanim V'Gai Kadosh, that we are this holy, chosen people. We want to do things which make us appreciate our greatness on the night of Pesach when we eat the Karban Pesach. So the Sefer HaChinuch finally broaches the topic that you're probably wondering why I just explained the last 7-8 mitzvahs, all about Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why do we need so many mitzvahs for the purpose of Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, remembering the Nes of Hashem passed over their houses and took us out of Mitzrayim? Why don't we just have one mitzvah, and that'll be the Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim? So he says there's a fundamental concept. Adam nifal kefi pulosa. People are influenced by their actions. That even and the hearts and the thoughts of a person are dragged after the actions that he does, for good or for bad. He says you could have a person who has a wicked heart and he thinks to do bad things, but at the end of the day, if he starts putting all his energy on learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, even if he's not doing it with Shem Shemayim, it'll turn him towards Tov. And at the end of the day, he'll come Shalolishma Bolishma. It'll transform him into a better person by being osek in mitzvahs. And he says the same thing. And through that, his actions will weaken his Yetzer Hara. Because the heart, the heart is dragged after the actions that we do influences who we are inside. Same thing, he says you could have a person that's tzaddik gomer, and he really wants to do Torah and mitzvahs, but he starts spending all day involved in things which are really bad things to do. His example, let's say a king forces him to do such things. So even though he knows the truth, but it will start to influence him, it will bring him down. And this is what it means. Mitzvos, part of where we have so many mitzvos is in order to constantly have us being involved in mitzvos, which elevate us. I think this is both a spiritual component and a psychological component to this fact that what we do has this tremendous spiritual hashpah on us, and it makes us start feeling and acting a certain way, then we start feeling that way. And he says, we have to be careful. Yitzhak could convince us you can go hang out in places with the leitzim and just fool around and yutz around, and you're not doing averos, and it's not going to bring you down. It's not going to transform you into a different person. And it's not true. He says when you start behaving in a certain way, and you start associate, I guess he means like people who would go hang out at bars all night. So he's not talking about even just the influence of the environment. He's talking about just acting in the way of a person who's not a Ben Torah will take a person who's in his heart is a Ben Torah and drag him away from being a Ben Torah. And it's something we have to be very careful about in our own avodas Hashem, to align our actions with the kind of person that we want to be. Realize that if we don't have our actions in line with who we want to be, then that's going to transform us away from who we want to be. And so he says, so this is why we have so many mitzvahs about Zecher Mitzrayim, because this is really the foundation of our Torah. One of the big pillars of our Torah is you'd see the nisim of Yetzias Mitzrayim and really concretize and give us some tremendous foundation on our emunah and how Hashem runs the world. So the more we do actions that tie us back to it, the more it brings us a connection with it, and the greater we become from it. Very famous Sefer HaChinuch, very fascinating idea that even though I would do action, it seems one idea, this idea that he's saying that every mitzvah that I would do, which ties me back to Yetzias Mitzrayim, the fact that not just that I eat the korban pesach, but the fact that when I eat it the right way, and I don't feed it, I cook it the right way, and I don't break the bones, and each aspect of that ties me in much more to Yetzias Mitzrayim and makes a totally different hashpah on me than it would without that component. And just this concept in human psychology, that when we behave a certain way, even if it's not, our heart is not there, but it transforms us and it brings our heart there. That if we want to transform ourselves and we want to be careful about who we transform into, we have to be careful about how we behave. Reminded, I once saw it in Sefer, it warned that doctors are at risk. I guess, for example, would be a dentist is at risk of becoming cruel, because even though he's doing a healing action, but all the time he's sitting and causing people pain actively, so it can be very dangerous to one's middos. One has to be very careful about, not saying that one should become a dentist, but that there's this risk that if a person is doing cruel actions to people, that can make him into a cruel person, even though he's by nature not a cruel person. One can ask on this Sefer HaChinuch that we do see people are very complicated, and we see people behave a certain way for many years, and then they make a drastic change, sometimes for good, sometimes for not so good. And I think Yechezkel Levenstein in the Yechezkel in the Maimar and the Middos Sefer is explaining this. He just makes one point about the way I understand what he's doing is he's pointing out when the Sefer HaChinuch says you do things shalom l'shma, it doesn't mean when you have a rasha who's like Eish Lahava, who has a fire and a major resentment towards what he's doing. So it seems that he's pointing out that if a person has a major resentment towards what he's doing and he just builds up that resentment while he's doing these actions, eventually that might come out and it's not going to transform. When a person is neutral about something, then his actions can tremendously influence him. If Yechezkel is going in the direction, he says that when we want to transform, he says we can't drop madregas in life. It's not a good idea. A person's not having good kavanah and davening, now he's just going to pretend he's going to become a totally different person tomorrow. What we can do is take on new behaviors. And those new behaviors can transform us into a different person over time when we develop new habits, because they, as the Sefer HaChinuch is saying, they influence our levavos. For example, in davening, I think most people are fairly neutral. Some people could be neutral about davening. They don't have the right feelings. They don't have a tremendous resentment. And when a person comes, and he says, it's so hard. We come with the right kavod for tefillah. We come with the mindset that we're here to bring honor to Hashem. That's why we're here to daven. And we try to daven as best as we can, so that has an influence on our feelings towards davening, and that also makes us in the category of those who honor Hashem. Even if we're not there emotionally and spiritually, but at least we're there, we're behaving that way, and that itself is bringing honor to Hashem. Another example is in the area of chesed. He talks specifically that we might not have a love for chesed, but we can act like we do, and it will have a tremendous influence on us. His example is vatronis, when a person sometimes needs to let things slide in the area of money. He points out, if you ever go into a tzedakah box, you see many coins that can be slightly damaged, because when people give tzedakah, they want to give their worst quarter. It's part of the nature of the human being to want to have a difficult time with vatronas. Even when I'm giving the tzedakah, it's a little difficult, and a person can work and just act as a mavater, assuming they're not going to be bitter and resentful towards it, and it will have a hashpah on their inner self, will transform their middos. He says, this is what we say in davening, v'sagilenu b'sarasecha. May we become accustomed to davening, may it become our nature, and then that will bring us to high levels of connection to Torah. Yechezkel says one of the main things holding us back is am keshei oref, that we have a brazenness, that we're not quick to admit when we're wrong, and be machnia, we're not quick to let go in areas when we need to let go. But he says it's very hard to change the inner kishkas of the person, but it's much easier to start behaving in the way that we want to be, and by accustoming ourselves to behaving that way, that will transform the life. And this is really the yesod of the Sefer HaChinuch, that we can behave in the way that we want to become, and that it will have a tremendous positive impact on us. Now, the way we behave when we come to learn, the way we behave when we come to daven, will have a tremendous impact on who we are deep on the inside. He says emunah is not the problem. People have emunah. The problem is the behaviors and the deeper feelings. And as the Sefer HaChinuch is warning, a person could be a maimin and behave in the wrong way and it will bring him down. And he's also telling us that a person can behave in the right way and become a much better person in the process. Hashem help us elevate ourselves and become better people. Have a wonderful Shabbos.